It's so wonderful to have you join us this morning for the Stewardship Celebration, our annual fall fundraiser. A couple of housekeeping pieces. Because we're expecting about 130 people in the Zoom room, we will ask people to stay muted. Otherwise, the feedback would be enormous. So we look forward to more conversations over the coming months. We would like to start out by paying respects to all tribal nations with a land acknowledgement. In Port Townsend, we are fortunate to live and work on the ancestral lands of many Coast Salish peoples, particularly the S'Klallam people, who have served as stewards of this place since time immemorial. We're grateful for their ongoing leadership to protect, restore, and revive this region's environment and its resources. We have an action-packed hour with the awarding of the annual Eleanor Stops Leadership Environmental Award, a keynote by our own city manager, John Mauro, an update on the Marine Science Center from our board president and myself, and we'll wrap up with a beautiful testimonial and some reflections from a remarkable young woman, Ellie Kravets. So let's get started with this year's Eleanor Stops Environmental Leadership Award. In my 8 years here with the Marine Science Center, this is really one of my favorite annual traditions. This year, you will meet this year's winner via video. And I think, please cue the video. Thanks, Brian.
Since 2009, the Port Townsend Marine Science Center has sponsored the Eleanor Stops Environmental Leadership Award. The award is presented annually to an individual in recognition of significant contributions in the protection and stewardship of the natural environment of the North Olympic Peninsula. Eleanor Stops was an active member of the Pacific Northwest Conservation Community for over 30 years. She founded the Admiralty Audubon chapter and was a primary driver behind the establishment of the Protection Island National Wildlife Refuge in 1982. Although she died in April 2012 at the age of 92, her legacy lives on. Her vision, advocacy, and determination exemplify the power and importance of community leadership and will be remembered for generations to come. The Port Townsend Marine Science Center is honored to present the 2021 Eleanor Stops Environmental Leadership Award to Connie Gallant. Connie has worked tirelessly as a leading environmental advocate and has demonstrated an unwavering commitment to preserving our natural resources.
I met Eleanor Stops several years ago during a talk that I gave at the Jefferson County Historical Society, and the topic was Heroines of the Olympic Peninsula, featuring 3 women who had made a huge dent on the protection of the Olympic National Forest as well as the Olympic National Park. It was such an honor to have Eleanor in the audience and meet her for the first time and speak with her about many of the issues. She is someone who I have known about for a very long time because of her incredible work for Protection Island, of course, and that of Helen Engel and Lorna Smith as well, and many others.
A lifelong activist, Connie has never been one to shy away from conflict whenever the best interests of a community are at stake. But when she and her husband J.D. moved to the Olympic Peninsula in 1982, her future as an environmental activist came into sharp focus.
My husband and I did some monitoring for several years on Quilcene and Daybah Bays for dissolved oxygen levels. And that taught me a great deal about the environment in the areas, the regulations, and the obstacles that we faced due to industrial pollution and the critical needs of all wildlife, birds and seals, and obviously our salmon runs. And so that brought into focus the many issues that we all have to contend with, that we all have to continue fighting for.
For many years, a local seafood company had been operating on the bay, producing spat or baby oysters, which did not negatively impact the environment. However, when the company was sold to a larger conglomerate, production increased fivefold and the situation changed dramatically.
The effect was almost immediate on the bay. We started seeing all the scum and awful, gross looking things coming out of their 17 some odd pipes that they had, all channeled, all discharging on the bay. They have always filtered the water coming in, but never going out. So we started recording all of that through videos, photos, and then through our monitoring, and got Olympic Forest Coalition, the board members, we took them down to the bay and they saw with their own eyes what was happening. And so they said, we have to try to put a stop to this. So it's going to take a long time for it to recover, like Chesapeake.
One of Connie's most notable achievements has been her groundbreaking work on the Wild Olympics campaign.
The Wild Olympics campaign is one of many key projects that I and the Olympic Forest Coalition work on. Deforestation anywhere is of major concern to me, not only because of the adverse effect on climate change, but also because of the catastrophic effects on wildlife. The Wild Olympics campaign came to be during late 2006, early 2007, when several local organizations met to discuss the potential of protecting more wilderness areas in addition to our rivers. We recognized that to mount such a campaign, we would need the assistance of national organizations. So we combined forces with national environmental groups and began planning the areas on the Olympic Peninsula that we wanted to protect.
With so many diverse stakeholders involved, how did they build support for such a momentous and far-reaching piece of legislation?
The campaign went through extraordinary measures to ensure that the areas that we were proposing on our map would not have any detrimental effects on any activities, and instead enhance the recreational activities that would benefit local businesses while protecting those areas. Getting the bill through Congress has been challenging. Luckily, we have champions like Representative Derek Kilmer and Senator Patty Murray, who are determined to see such protections become a reality. The objections have mainly been overcome because of the fact that we have over 800 businesses on the Olympic Peninsula who have supported us. We have well over 10,000 local supporters, as well as faith organizations and clubs. So it's been very rewarding to get the type of support that we're getting.
Lawsuits are expensive. A protracted legal battle can threaten the very existence of a nonprofit who takes on big businesses who harm the environment. Though she is unwavering in her conviction that the environment must be protected, Connie also knows that keeping the lines of communication open can often facilitate success.
All of us, Olympic Forest Coalition, Olympic Park Associates, Olympic Audubon, and the North Olympic Group of the Sierra Club, with perhaps the exception of the Olympic Park Associates because they mainly deal with national park issues. The other three, at some point in time, all of us were in litigation against a timber company or timber industry for trying to log into sensitive areas or perhaps going over buffers, that type of thing. We decided that we were going to see if we could not only put a stop to the drainage of funds and effort that it took the small nonprofit organizations to mount lawsuits against these giants, but to see if we could come to some sort of agreement. So we formed the Olympic Forest Collaborative. And with Representative Kilmer's blessing, we got together with timber industry. I could see from their reaction that they were not ready to really talk. And so I spoke up and I said, okay, let's pretend that this conference table is a river and you're on the other side and I'm on this side. I'm going to walk across and meet you halfway. And then perhaps when we're each at the halfway mark, we can begin discussing in earnest the pros and cons of lawsuits, the pros and cons of constantly being in litigation and not really resolving the main issue, which is the protection of our forests and our wildlife. Do any of you want to talk? And so one of the CEOs said, I'll talk, and then followed by the others. And so we began to engage in a very good conversation. Interestingly enough, some of them stated that they were very concerned as well, because they were all fishermen and loved to hunt and fish, and they did not want to see the population of salmon depleted and so forth. So we ultimately came to an agreement of establishing several pilot projects for thinning instead of clear cutting. All of us are quite pleased with the results from what we have seen, and this has been going on for several years now. That is working. And so we're very encouraged by that, and we're hoping that that is the way that the future of the timber industry will go.
In September 2021, the Wild Olympics Wilderness and Wild and Scenic Rivers Act passed the U.S. House of Representatives. If the bill passes the Senate, it will permanently protect more than 126,000 acres of public land as wilderness and 19 rivers and their major tributaries as wild and scenic rivers.
We must come to understand that it is cheaper to protect than to restore wilderness. We can no longer afford to treat our forests like mines. Extractive industrial forestry is a losing model from the last century. We're talking about our planet. We do not have any guarantees of any other planet in the entire universe that is like our planet. This is it. You have to be on top of all these issues all the time. But regardless, never give up fighting for what you believe in.
How beautiful. Wow. Congratulations, Connie. We are so thrilled to be honoring you this morning. Thank you for your inspirational words, as well as your work. As you were speaking, I was reminded of the sentiment for the marine world of one water, one future. And your words and work really capture what is powerful about that.
Thank you.
And we're so happy that you're actually here with us in Zoom land. So we'd like to invite everybody who would like to share your congratulations with Connie in the chat function of Zoom. And a number of you have already done that. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And so bravo, and we look forward to what you have next, since that's very exciting accomplishment. So Connie's work and story about building coalitions resonates really strongly with me, particularly because at the core of the Marine Science Center is our collaborative spirit. And partnerships are part of our DNA with the Port Townsend Marine Science Center. And in that vein, we are really excited to partner with the city and the ongoing leadership efforts of several agencies in coastal resilience to talk more about the ongoing interagency work on climate resilience and how the Marine Science Center's plans can help provide an iconic project for that. I'm honored this morning to introduce our city manager, John Mauro, who's been leading such efforts for over a decade from Seattle to New Zealand. Please help me welcome John Mauro. Yay!
Thanks,
Hi,
Janine.
John. Good morning.
Hi, good morning. Hey, I'm so glad to be here. I'm going to set my timer now because I only have 20 minutes. And so I'm going to try to make good use of that time. And first, just let me say what an honor to be here. Congratulations to people like Connie who make this whole place work. And wow, it's inspiring to hear one person's story of how contribution matters for stewardship. So, I love this place. I'm kind of new here. I love this town, and I love the Port Townsend Marine Science Center. So really what a fantastic day to gather in celebration of stewardship. Look, I've got some slides to show. It's a Zoom environment, so that'll go hopefully pretty smoothly. But kind of quickly, what does a city manager know about climate change? And I mean, one way to answer that question is to say, well, not that much. I'm still learning, but I do have a bit of previous history working with climate change for the last 20 or so years. Both doing climate research in Alaska, working with a nonprofit community, some roles doing climate change in the cities of Seattle and Auckland, and then getting really lucky to work with groups like C40 cities that are an international collaborative effort around climate change, both the reduction of emissions, but also preparing for the impacts of climate change. And then I guess I'd say that, working for this beautiful community and helping to operate the city's an ecosystem. And we also are very much exposed to climate impacts, just like most industries in most of the world. And so it's very much on my mind as we work through some of what those challenges are. So look, I've skipped ahead a little far already. So look, the overview here is, I'll just give you the what, why, how, who, and when. It's pretty basic. It'll be a bit of a teaser. And like I said, I'm only here for 20 minutes, but I think I'd like to follow up, actually. I'm going to propose next week on my radio show on KPTZ that any of and all of you who want to fire questions my way and get a dialogue going, join me. You can even zoom in and be part of a conversation. And I think next week we'll do that from 12:30 till 12:55 on KPTZ. So what is climate resilience? Well, let me tell you briefly, probably what you already know. But it's something that's clearly happening now. We're getting everything from hotter to wetter to drier to fiercer to higher sea level. And how we adapt now is really important, because we're locked into climate change for at least 3 or 4 decades, even if we stopped emitting carbon dioxide right now and methane and all the other emissions. So, what is climate resilience? Here's a picture in Port Townsend of a rain garden. And, it could be as simple as this. It's thinking about green infrastructure, stormwater, coastal resilience, and strategies, energy resilience, heat and water, and the creative and proven and significant ways we can plan now for the changes that are already happening.
John, I'm going to interrupt you because I don't see your slides.
Oh gosh. There we go. That was my error. There, that's way more interesting than looking at me. Okay, can you see me now?
Yes, we got the
Great.
slides. Thank you.
Okay, you just missed a title slide, so we're all good. So, thank you for the reminder there to turn on my screen. So, this is an example in our own backyard of what a tilt toward climate resilience could look like. But I'd also add that it's about a just transition with an equity lens woven right across the entire approach, as well as an integrated approach with reducing our emissions. I think those things aren't counter to each other, although they could be. They're actually part of the same package. And then, I'll just, ask kind of hypothetically, well, what does climate resilience mean for us in Washington State, or even here locally in Port Townsend? There are a number of things that are happening on a very big scale, like demographic change and migration. And I'll just say, we will struggle with how we adapt our community, but we will also be a refuge for climate change. I've met probably 10 people in the last week who have said to me, part of why they're here is that they're fleeing fires or climate change or heat, and this is a more, a better location for them. So it's happening now. Moving on to what else is climate resilience? Well, here's another local picture. It could be renewable solar energy on the high school building, or some degree of energy resilience from more frequent and more intense storms that will disrupt our power supply. It's also important for me to kind of briefly explain why climate resilience. I probably don't need to, but these images will probably help. This one's very real for us. This is Washington State. And this is actually 7 years ago in the Chilwaucum fire. Fire is a real part of the ecosystem, but the kind of degrees of intensity and severity are something that we probably haven't seen before. And so beyond fire, all climate risks, this is the kind of thing that means about $4 trillion worth of assets that are at risk by 2030 around our world. This is another Washington State photo that's disturbing. I think it's the Cowlitz River. And I'll say in 2020, there were about 22 separate events that were climate related across the United States that were over $1 billion worth of damage. Just think of that. It's never happened to that degree before. There were some events in 2011, 2017 that were close, but 22 events by far this past year eclipsed all other records there. That's significant. That's according to NOAA. So it's a good source. The other way to pivot, though, is instead of showing you doom and gloom pictures, now that I've maybe scared you or reminded you what's at stake, there's an opportunity frame here. And I think, this is the kind of slide that would say, how do we save money? How do we save lives? How do we transition livelihoods, provide equity, improve health, and really shake that deficit mindset and think about what the opportunity is here? What do we have to gain? So that'll launch us into how we get there. And I'll just go through 4 things real quickly, and I'll be looking at my timer, and we've got all of 13 minutes left. So I first want to thank what got us here today. There's a raft of ongoing work, including work from Local 2020, the North Olympic Development Council with grants, toolkit, climate action plan, the Puget Sound Partnership, which funds some of that work, and our very own Climate Action Committee, spearheaded by the city, by Judy Server and Steve King on my team, and really great leadership from that whole CAC, including Cindy Jane and other CAC members. They've really taken the mantle on climate change and have done tremendous work, especially recently with emissions reductions and the inventory. And so right now is a perfect time for us to really elevate this conversation and join it together with things that are already happening. I mean, you'll see I've threw up a slide of or a picture of the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. They're in our backyard. They're thinking about things like hydrogen and buses. There's an Association of Washington Cities that has a climate resilience handbook. And then there are literal actions that the city has signed up for as part of the climate dashboard, the climate adaptation dashboard on the Local 2020 website. And I encourage you to go check that out. So four principles that I like to sort of just make sure resonate, and then we can move on. I show this slide I took, I think I was in Amsterdam or somewhere nearby when I took this picture. And I asked people, is this transportation choice, stormwater, water quality, green infrastructure, or density done well? And the correct answer is yes, because it's everything. And I think it makes my point where if we're going to do climate change resilience and climate change action well, we need to integrate across silos, and we need to think about new ways of doing things instead of separation. There's so much I could say about this, but I will just keep moving through general principles. They all begin with I, so it's a bit easy to remember. This actually here is a repurposed highway in Auckland, New Zealand, that is now a bike and walking trail. And to some degree, innovation is born out of necessity. You got to be scrappy and creative and think about solving problems that might not exist fully right now, but will in a couple of years or a couple of decades. The other thing is investing. I think, this is all great to talk about, but, show me the money. Some of the work that I did previously in Auckland was the first municipal green bond in New Zealand and actually Australasia. We were specifically setting aside money to deal with climate action. The New Zealand government was doing the well-being budget, which tagged into climate change. And I'll say the city budget, it's a pretty Spartan budget now due to impacts of COVID, and we're pretty bare bones, but we're thinking about climate change with stormwater investments in water and wastewater. We're thinking about shorelines and the work that our team, and Judy in particular, has done with a shoreline master program. We're thinking about our infrastructure assets, and we're thinking about buildings from a climate change perspective. And I'm hopeful that that will translate into investing in those options because it's a good investment for our community. And then finally, the inclusion piece. Like I said earlier, a just transition is critically important. We need to bring everybody with us. And this is something we did in New Zealand with the 19 Maori tribes that lived in Auckland and did it across sectors. And I won't get into great detail. Maybe we could talk about this on KPTZ, but we really set the table with research, primary research done in Auckland. We held a 3-day symposium where teams worked through innovation tasks and a co-design. We had the New Zealand Prime Minister open up the conference. We had a Dragon's Den where the ideas were tested with the CEOs from local companies and organizations. And some of that was written into the climate action plan in Auckland. And I would say we have existing plans, and we probably need to spend more time working on implementing them. But could we do something like that here? And that's where I think about the Marine Science Center really potentially leading the way. I'll skip through this pretty quickly, but those principles, if you match with how to embed action across things like the strategic plan level, activities, the budget level, and an attitude for change, that's how change happens, frankly. And that's what I'm trying to show here is that I guess I have to click the button a few times, sorry, to actually embed action across those principles. Again, we could talk more about that. I think I'm going to skip this next slide. I tend to do a little bit of talking about how to make change happen. And I'll just say at a high level, I like to drop little actions into what is a tool set that we need, what is a skill set, and what is a mindset, and then start kind of populating each of these with steps of how to make change happen. And this is just my words here for how to make things happen. But I just wanted you to think about, there's tools we actually need to leverage here and skills to be able to operate those tools. But there's also a mindset, and actually some of the things we need to do around mindset. That bucket is fuller than the tools that we need and the information that we need. We have a lot of that, but it's critically important that we all adopt the right mindset for change. All right, so who, again, will build climate resilience? I think that's kind of important because we know where we want to go. I think we know generally how to get there. And I think the who is hopefully why some of you are here today. I don't think it's comprehensive, this little list here, but there are ways to throw your weight behind the work. And I really think in a community like Port Townsend, finding what you're passionate about, what you're good at, and making sure it all links up as a community, that's almost like our meta task as a community. If everyone has a seat at the table and it's the right seat, we're really drawing on your strengths and your passion, we can pretty much do anything. So I think, here's just 4 areas for where we might set the table. More information. Obviously, some of us are skilled at data and research and thinking about downscaling projections of climate impacts. I think about USGS or NOAA or some of the expertise in our community, including the Marine Science Center. That more information is going to be really important so we understand what we're dealing with and it's ongoing and evolving. More education is man, if I can't think of too many better organizations to say, you reach a wide audience. There are a number of people here today. It's clear, it's compelling. People love what you do. How do we use that to drive a clear, compelling, and cogent message around the call for action for climate resilience in action? That is a place where we can partner. A collaboration, speaking of partnership, we're working together. It's all hands on deck. We're chasing funding, trying to leverage our strength. And clearly no one organization or institution can do this alone. And then, like I said earlier, integration. I mean, thinking about how we measure out equity, how we reduce emissions, how we think about the wider health and economic and social and well-being benefits of action. It's not like an eat your broccoli moment, although I do love broccoli. It's like, what's the opportunity here? This is juicy and delicious. And in fact, we're compelled to take action because it's irresistible, not because we have to do it. So I think that this is a turning point for how we take what we've done so far, we galvanize and amplify our action and accelerate our efforts. And I think that's going to take all of us. And then when will we have climate resilience? Well, this is not a kind of an end goal because it's an ongoing challenge. I think it's going to take some time, but clearly the more progress we make now, the better. And so to try to feed that, I mean, here's an example of, Port Townsend being slammed by waves in a bit of a southerly. There are other images that evoke inspiration, and I just wanted to leave you with a few of those in my final 5 minutes. So first, not too far away, a city I used to work for, like we're doing here in our community, rain gardens and stormwater treatment, green infrastructure is tremendously important for a city like Seattle. This is years ago, probably back almost when I worked for them 10, 15 years ago. But they value their urban forest at $7 or $8 billion of value. And they're aiming, even as an intensifying, one of the fastest growing, larger cities in the country, they're aiming to increase the canopy cover instead of decrease it. So obviously the benefits of doing that from a climate resilience point of view are extraordinarily compelling. Hamburg in Germany, this is such a cool building. They're actually harvesting algae and converting it to biogas and actually powering the building. Well, what happens when the power goes out? Well, it doesn't. It's just such an internal sustainable structure. I mean, it looks crazy, but that concept of how can we drive resilience even at the individual building level is quite compelling. Copenhagen, one of my favorite little towns, I guess cities, they were hit in 2011, I believe, with a huge, what they called cloudburst, a big, heavy rainfall event. And it woke them up, really. They were climate, emissions reducer extraordinaire on the global scene, but they were really not paying attention as much to the impacts of climate change. And so they quickly adopted a new strategy and went for taking gray infrastructure and making green infrastructure. And so they delay that outfall of water. They get great percolation into the soil and instead of releasing it to the harbor. And literally you can go and swim in the harbor. It's incredibly cleaner than it's been for decades. Melbourne too, it's not just the green and the green infrastructure, it's what it means for people. Those alleyways and those spaces in Melbourne, for instance, are now places for people. And as a friend and visionary councillor Kathy Oakes says, they used to be garbage trucks, and those laneways are now green community spaces. We've started to do a little bit of that here in Port Townsend. I think we can do a lot more. Toronto, I took this picture on a roof in the middle of the city, and it doesn't need too much explanation. They've got a food policy council. They have one of the largest green roof, in agriculture on the roof and anywhere I've seen. And that might not be an option for us necessarily, but it's clearly a resilient local agricultural strategy. Two final lessons. One, Cape Town, energy retrofits are great, and they did fantastic work on the global stage. They forgot about climate resilience and they almost ran out of water. So it kind of makes the point that you can't think about climate resilience or climate mitigation without thinking about how to adapt to climate change. And then finally, Rotterdam. Rotterdam is one of those communities that they're thinking about the global stage of the circular economy. And as the mayor has literally said to me and to others, our know-how is the first-class export product. They used to be the largest port in the world. Moving stuff was their thing. They're transitioning their entire mindset to not moving stuff as much as moving ideas. And on the climate resilient scene, that's fantastically important, especially for a port town like Rotterdam that deals with water in a way that few other cities do. And then finally, just some summary thoughts from my backyard here. Like I said, the city's doing some work here, but it really will take all of us in better collaboration and partnership, and frankly, you at our heels to push us to go further and faster, but not alone, because there's limitations to what any of us can do by ourselves. I think there's some ideas here. There might be new ways of leveraging new information, new data. Like I said earlier, understanding the likelihood and severity of impacts on Port Townsend, particularly things like fire, if not fire, then at least smoke that we seem to be seeing and experiencing more frequently. Obviously, sea level rise, possibly drought, thinking about our water supply. I think we should be backing our current work. The work that the NODC does, the CAC, Local 2020, is tremendous. And they've been at this for years, and they've really set the table with great information and really great buy-in. And so we're not starting from scratch. This is like, how do we join our efforts together? I think there's an option here for possibly multi-sector commitments when people actually throw down in the sand what they're going to commit to as institutions and as organizations. I'd like to maybe explore that concept with the Marine Science Center and others in town. I really thought the symposium concept was a lot of fun, not just because the Prime Minister rocked up and opened it up for us in New Zealand, but because it was really an energizing opportunity to sell the message that's compelling, to get people excited about the vision, and to really create buy-in and responsibility for change. So something like that, I know Port Townsend is just really good at. We're good at gathering, we're good at joining together. I think there's a great opportunity for us there. And then I would just throw it out to you. We don't have enough time. I think I got 1 minute left, 13 seconds left, but maybe next week on KPTZ at 12:30, we can talk about what thoughts do you have as seasoned members of this community that know this place deeper than I do, and who really stand to contribute in a very meaningful way, more than you even have to date, on how we deal with climate change here locally. And I'm really thrilled not just to be connected into the Marine Science Center, but you've made some strategic moves on your new building and location that put you at the forefront for really being a conduit for telling a story that's compelling, and talking to our wider community, our region, about why we need to take pretty urgent action. So I look forward to dialoguing with you next week. I'll put in the chat box how to do that. And I think my time is now up. I really appreciate the opportunity to join you. I look forward to continuing the conversation.
John, thank you so much. So much. Every time I talk to you, I feel so positive about the future, and that can be challenging some of these days. So thank you, thank you. We're excited about those next steps and expanding the conversation on KPTZ. We love KPTZ, yay. And that's going to be Thursday, October 21st. At what time again?
It starts at 12:30, and
12:30.
I'll give KPTZ a heads up that there might be some either special guests or some folks joining us from maybe this group. You can actually zoom in or listen on the radio. Very cool. Very cool. Okay, we're looking forward to that, as well as your work with the North Olympic Development Corporation, NODC, Council, and Local 2020 have just been doing extraordinary work. So we look forward to merging in, and it's going to be, the future is bright with your leadership. Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. All right. So as John said, the purchase of Flagship, there was one of the goals was to be a really active part of the solution for coastal resilience, and to create a demonstration project that can hold up some of those commitments that John asked for, as well as some innovative ideas. And so that's kind of baked into our plans going forward. And I'd love to have join me in a conversation about Flagship and some of our plans, our own board president. She has served as a distinguished career in aquariums and informal science over decades. She's one of the Marine Science Center's very first members since back in the early 80s. Please help me welcome Diane Baxter, board president of the Marine Science Center. I can hear the shouts from here, Diane. Woo!
Thank you, Janine.
Although if we didn't have people muted, there would be a cacophony of shouts and whoops for you. So thank you, thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Janine. It is such a pleasure to serve as board president, especially at this incredibly exciting time. I'm going to ask you, Janine, what excites you most about Flagship Landing?
Well, it's hard to contain it to just one thing. So I'll highlight two of the things that I'm most excited about and were really drivers for the decision. One is just what we've been hearing about with John Mauro, the opportunity for Flagship Landing and our process to be a showcase for coastal resilience and to participate in the ongoing regional work of those organizations that he talked about. The second is that we'll be reaching with that location a much bigger, but perhaps more importantly, a much broader audience. We'll be talking to people and bringing these concepts to people who don't already understand it, and perhaps that don't agree with the perspective. And so it's going to be really exciting and challenging. And our goal is to tell the long story of human interaction with the Salish Sea since time immemorial. So how about you, Diane? What excites you most as board president?
Well, a lot of things. One of the sort of practical things that really makes me feel really good about this next step is that the acquisition of Flagship Landing allows us to grow in a phased way. Phased growth allows us to grow thoughtfully in a financially sustainable pace and continue to reflect the organization and the community's evolving priorities. Flagship Landing really gives Port Townsend Marine Science Center an exciting next chapter. Started thinking about that, Janine. Everybody wants to know what's going to be in Flagship Landing coming in March.
Well, that is indeed exciting. We've got a number of plans for different spaces, but probably what most people want to see is the exhibit gift shop space. So I have a special treat for you today. And I'm working on sharing my screen. And there we go.
Great.
Okay. So this is a mock-up of the center space at Flagship Landing. Here are the two entrances here. And so that center space is going to be a combination of gift shop and changing exhibits. And so one of our goals is to keep it fresh and new and alive. And our own program director, Diane Quinn, and her trusty sidekick and extraordinarily talented exhibit designer, Andrew Whiteman, are already on the job. We're very excited. And just to give you an indicator of the quality level, Diane and Andrew worked for over a decade and a half, and on the lead team that created the new Burke Museum in Seattle. So we have our own dream team, and I am super excited about what they are cooking up. So coming attractions, there's more fun coming, but that will be opening in March of 2022. In addition to that, we are going to be using an additional space at Flagship Landing for an exciting project that, again, Diane Quinn is leading. It is the articulation of the elephant seal skeleton, which we have on from our NOAA permit, which will become the centerpiece of a outreach program called Elephant Seal in the Classroom. We'll also have offices at Flagship, which will be really pivotal as we weave ourselves into the fabric of Water Street and Port Townsend, and work much more closely with our key partners of Northwind Arts, the Historical Society, and the Maritime Center. So we are pretty excited about that and looking forward to great things. Diane, one of the questions I hear, and I bet you do too, is will the Marine Science Center still be at Fort Worden in some way?
Excellent questions, and I'm glad that people are asking because the answer is very exciting. Yes, we are going to, in the near term, the aquarium and museum will be staying open at Fort Worden at least through 2024, and likely a few years after that. In the longer term, the museum is going to continue as a field station for educational and community science programs. As we all know, in the long term, also, the pier will be coming down, but it won't be before 2024. So we're going to hang around there for a while. Janine, another important announcement was made last week. Can you tell us about it?
Yes. It was a deliberative, very well, extremely thought over decision. I don't know if it's, I've made the decision to step down as executive director as of the end of 2022. Most of you have already heard this, I'm hoping. These next, and it was very conscious decision, timed precisely because now is the perfect time. These next several chapters of the Marine Science Center and the growth horizon is really a 10-year window. And I have some other journeys I'd like to explore before I retire. And there's not going to be a better time than now at this new beginning to find just the right person to lead us over this next decade. I want to reassure people I'm not going anywhere. I love this community and I'm here, and I will stand and support the new executive director in every way I can. Perhaps even more important than all of that is who is telling the story really matters. And I am very happy that the board is using this opportunity to lift up diverse voices and is actively encouraging applications from every sector and every walk of life to find just the right person to lead this next series of chapters. Hey, Diane, would you like to talk a little bit about the search process?
Sure.
The planning for the transition?
Happy to do so. And happy to talk about it. Not so happy to see you go, Janine, as you know. The board is very sad to see Janine go, but we agree. Janine has chosen a truly opportune time for the board to recruit a new leader who can reflect the diverse voices of our community. We thank Janine for that thoughtfulness and even more for her incredibly significant legacy. She's left the organization in a very strong financial position. We have a deeply engaged board and the staff are amazingly talented. Given that the board is actively searching, we have a search committee looking for an entrepreneur who recognizes that this chapter is just jam-packed full of creative opportunities for this point in the history of the organization. The next chapter of Port Townsend Marine Science Center looks bright. And for that, we thank you, Janine, as well as all of you who are on this call, this Zoom, because it is your support that makes it happen.
Diane, it is such a delight to serve with you. I couldn't have asked for a more supportive and visionary and positive partner in the leadership of the organization. And I am so, so grateful. And I know that the organization is in great hands and the board is on top of it through this whole pandemic. The board has leaned in and is in great stead. So I think we are moving on to the next section. So again, Diane, thank you so much. And
thank you.
We'll see you over tea soon, I'm sure.
I look forward to it.
So we as the Marine Science Center talk a lot about our mission and grand visions, but oftentimes actually, it's easier to convey these big ideas and transformations when we hear an impactful story of one individual. And we are so lucky this morning to have the most inspiring young woman who has agreed to share her story today. Please welcome Ellie Kravets. Hey, Ellie, we're so glad you're joining us today. So
thank you. Thanks.
Take it away.
So much. Sounds good. Hello, everyone. I know quite a few names in the crowd, so it's lovely to see everybody. Since 2018, I've worn many different hats with and around PTMSC. I started as a summer camps assistant. I was the Museum AmeriCorps member for 2 terms, and most recently I was involved as a UW Museology student working to improve accessibility in informal STEM education. So it's safe to say that I am a huge supporter of the work that the Marine Science Center does here, and it's truly an honor to be speaking with you this morning. A little bit more personally about me, I grew up in New Orleans. My childhood was punctuated by man-made marine-based disasters. I was 10 when my family evacuated for Hurricane Katrina, and I had just turned 15 when the Deepwater Horizon oil spill began. Too often, I saw my hometown and my home state have to pick up the pieces from disasters that were created by people far divorced from Southeast Louisiana. And even as a kid, I could see what a difference community made in the face of disaster. Recovery happened because of neighbors helping neighbors, local organizations building networks of resilience, and local governments being on the ground quickly and where it mattered. New Orleans is also where I personally fell in love with environmental education. During the summer of 2010, in the middle of the Deepwater Horizon spill, I was hard at work as an education volunteer at my local zoo. I would wake up to news broadcasts about the latest efforts to cap the spill, spend all day fielding questions around local marsh ecology and oiled wildlife response, and return home to repeat the cycle again the next day. In the face of disaster, I felt like I was doing something, connecting community members to information that helped them better respond to what was happening in their own backyard. That summer, the zoo's volunteer team went above and beyond just environmental education. Education was a vital piece of a larger goal, and that goal was to mobilize people. It was clear to me then that this is what I wanted to do, personally, professionally, for the rest of my life. I left Louisiana to go to college, and so did most of my New Orleans community. My family had trickled out of the state, and school friends drifted to other parts of the country for their own college careers. A year out of college, I found myself working in a national park in Indiana, and I enjoyed my job, but I was missing a deeper sense of community. I found myself wondering what was next for the students I was working with. How was I equipping them to be a better steward of their own backyard from a national park that could have been hours away from their home? That answer didn't seem clear, and so I decided to move on. I started looking for jobs in Washington, a state that had always captured the best parts of my imagination. And then I accepted my first position as a summer camps assistant at PTMSC. And then again, about 2 weeks later, I submitted my first application for my first of my 2 AmeriCorps terms. In PTMSC, I saw an organization that was naturally treating environmental education as a part of a larger process. It's not enough to just know about the challenges facing our nearshore environments, but PTMSC's educational goals go beyond knowledge. Instead, I saw the folks at the Marine Science Center actively working to build community and engagement with the scientific infrastructure of the Salish Sea. And I think that's a huge deal. Having lived through Katrina and the BP oil spill, I know what a difference strong community makes when it counts. I can say personally that I felt that sense of community every day I walked into PTMSC. In every other organization I've worked for, the scientists doing the work are not the same people having conversation with the general public. But at PTMSC, the line between scientists and general public is blurred at every opportunity, and as it absolutely should be. But what does that look like? To me, it looks like the kid fixated on one of the microscope stations in the exhibits, absorbing the jittery movements of the live plankton or the craggy surface of a barnacle shell. It looks like the kid who collected a fistful of rocks, shells, and feathers on the beach, and then insisted that she and her family go back to the museum to take a closer look at them. It looks like the dedicated community science volunteer who takes an active role in monitoring our nearshore environments and whose experiences, enthusiasm, and dedication are naturally bleeding out into conversations with visitors and the public. It looks like the group of beach walkers I encountered while out on a sea star monitoring survey who ended up pitching in for a while to help the survey team spot a couple of sneaky stars. It looks like the incredible partnership between Puget Sound Restoration Fund, PTMSC, and a group of local community tinkerers to develop and build new exhibit material on the endangered pinto abalone. Community building is all of this and more. A million ways that PTMSC works to build a network of folks who are fired up, excited, and engaged with the incredible marine ecosystem in our backyard, excuse me. For my part, at the end of my second AmeriCorps term, I applied to be a master's student with the UW Museology graduate program. I want to push other organizations to approach this work with PTMSC's community building mindset. I fully believe that building resilience through community is how we face the current climate crisis. Community helped my hometown push past the unthinkable. And in climate change, we are now facing the unthinkable on a global scale. Facing crisis alone can be paralyzing, but I believe it is so much less so when you feel like you are playing one part of a bigger whole. I am so deeply grateful for my time at PTMSC and to all of the folks here who have helped me make Washington, and more specifically, Port Townsend, a home. So thank you so much for all of your time this morning.
As always, I am just so touched by you and the power of and the just who you are. Just thank you so much. And now it is my pleasure to share with all of you that there is a $10,000 challenge fund provided by a generous anonymous donor this morning. And I would like to invite you, Ellie and all the rest of the gang would like to invite you to help build resilience through community by supporting the Marine Science Center with a donation this morning. There are several ways. We make it easy for you, or as easy as we possibly can. There's a link in the chat, which you can, it's a live link, you can click on that. or soon you'll receive a real deal paper letter in the mail with a return envelope if you prefer to write a paper check, or you can go to the website and donate there. We are so touched and so grateful that you joined us this morning. We look forward to many more conversations and hopefully in person again when it's safe. All right. Have a great day and thank you all for joining us.
Janine, can you also mention the lecture on Sunday?
Oh, yes, yes. We have coming up, speaking of building community, Linda Mapes, who is the extraordinary Seattle Times columnist, who is her recent work on the Southern residents is featured in her own book, Shared Home, Shared Waters. And that has been turned into an exhibit that we are hosting through the end of the month. Also, there's a lecture coming up this Sunday, 3 o'clock, and you can go again to our website and sign in for that. And you'll get the link to the lecture with Linda Mapes that will address her newest book. So we're thrilled about that. And I would like also, there's a whole host of people behind the scenes. You can't see them behind me or to the sides, but just the brilliant work of this seamless process is expertly choreographed by our own Liesl Slabaugh. Liesl, always in awe. Gabrielle, Brian, and the whole gang. Thank you so much. And have a great day. Thank you.